I would probably take an average 1-2 grinder playing his A game over an average 25-50 grinder playing his C game any day.
You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast. Each week, you'll get to peek inside the greatest minds in the game and discover what makes them successful.
Mental toughness separates those that can't handle the stress.
If you're going to treat it like an amateur, you're probably going to have amateur results.
Now here's your host, Elliot Rowe.
Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Rowe. This episode is brought to you by Primed Mind. Primed Mind is the simplest way to start improving your poker mindset. And when you start your free 7-day trial, you'll get access to our complete set of poker-specific audios, as well as the entire library of over 300 primer audios. To start your free trial, just visit pokermindcoach.com/primed. That's pokermindcoach.com/primed.
My guest on today's podcast is Bryan Paris. Bryan is a shining example of what it takes to survive and thrive in professional poker over a long period of time. He's been in poker long enough to have suffered the effects of Black Friday quite significantly and have had to have made big changes to his life to keep his professional career on track. He's only the second player to have hit $10 million in online MTT cashes, and he did that as far back as 2016. And he's since gone on to make over $12 million in online cashes alone. Bryan's now a hugely popular Twitch streamer and an ambassador for Natural 8 Poker. Personally, I got to know Bryan at the very beginning of my own career in professional poker when we were stablemates in the same professional poker stable. I always found him to be very insightful and very generous with his time and thoughts. So let's get to it and see inside the mind of someone who's pretty well seen it all, survived, and come out the other side stronger than ever. So welcome, Bryan. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. I want to start really by giving everybody, you'll be familiar to many of our listeners and watchers, but everybody an idea as to how it all began for you, because, and I'm saying this with all due respect because I'm much older than you, but you go back a long way in poker.
Yes.
So tell us where it all began and just talk a little bit about your early development from the point when you first played the game to the point where you became a professional poker player.
So it began, if you want to go way back, it began very early for me. I was watching my grandpa play 5-card draw on AOL, the free one, back in 1991 or something when I was like 6 years old. So I learned the rules at a very young age. And, I didn't play until I was 18, of course, but I always sort of had this idea of like playing card games for money. I was very big into Magic the Gathering growing up as a kid. So I would like play that competitively. I go to tournaments and stuff. I never actually qualified for the Pro Tour, but I got quite close a couple of times. So I like the idea of like competitive card games for prizes was always something that was very prominent for me. When I got to high school in 2002, I was 17. We played home games, like me and my friends, we'd play home games. We'd play a little bit of Hold'em, but we'd play all the weird off the wall variants like Chicago and baseball and stuff. So that was like a somewhat formative experience for me. I was the second best player in the game, which meant I was stuck slightly. The best player in the game was just up like infinite and everyone else was stuck.
Yeah.
So sort of an illustration of how the success mindset would have to come, and how like the gains accrued to the top whatever percent of players. So then when I turned 18, I went to college and I would play online from there, in my dorm room or whatever to make extra money for expenses. And, I never really had to, I started making money right away because it was so easy back then. Yeah. Just like being young and, being willing to apply the sort of lessons I had learned from playing Magic and like do just like a cursory amount of research into like opening ranges and theory of poker, very basic type stuff. It was more than enough to just crush the games back then. So, from college, I played my whole time through college. And then when I graduated, I kind of just went right into it and never really looked back.
Yeah. Just you mentioned taking some lessons from Magic, obviously some macro thoughts. What were those sort of macro thoughts, macro approaches, which you took from one and transferred into poker?
Well, like the probabilistic thinking is a big one. You're a certain percent to draw whatever card you need, and that will make you X percent to win the game. That was a big sort of takeaway. Another one is kind of like adjusting to what your opponents are doing. That's a big part of Magic, at least constructed Magic. You have to like change your deck around to know what other people are doing, and you kind of have to be one step ahead of the competition. That way, it's called a metagame.
Yeah.
So that sort of concept would apply to poker to me as well. But just overall, just the general idea of like, this is a card game. If I play it well enough, I make money.
Yeah.
That was the main takeaway for me.
Okay, great. Now, obviously, okay, so you first became a professional prior to Black Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just talk a little bit about the challenges you've had, because over a career that's lasted as long as yours, there must have been numerous highs and lows. Black Friday, I'd like to touch on at some point, because that's the kind of variance that people don't think about.
Oh, yeah.
When they talk about variance in poker. But just tell us a little bit about the highs and lows in all the years, really. And as I say, we'll deal with Black Friday maybe as a separate category, but tell us about what the biggest challenges have been.
So at first, I always had this challenge of like, I had kind of an imposter syndrome my first like 2 or 3 years playing MTTs, because I'd be playing against guys like Sean Deeb and a lot of these guys who have gone on to become like, really very top tier, strong players, like the very best of the best, right? And I was making money, but I wasn't like holding a candle to those guys. So I always had this sort of imposter syndrome thing until 2009, when I had my first like big online score. I won the Sunday Brawl on Full Tilt for, I don't know, mid 90K or something like that. And I actually beat Sean heads up in that tournament. I had slightly more than him going into heads up, and I offered an even chop, and he just typed LOL in the chat. And I was like, all right, well, I have to beat this guy now. And then 15 minutes later, I did it. And that was like a huge breakthrough moment for me in my MTT career. And so then from 2009 to 11, we can go into Black Friday a little bit later if you want, but from 2009 to 11, I had a very nice stretch. But yeah, I mean, there's been ups and downs, of course. Like in 2010, there was the fund that was backing me kind of like went bankrupt overnight. Yeah. And I had to just sort of jump back on my own. And so I asked my friend to front me, enough money to play a Sunday worth of buy-ins, and I won like 40K that day or something. So it's like I've had a lot of experience, like having a lot of money, losing it, immediately getting it back. Like the ups and downs are part of the game, and it's definitely something you have to like evolve mentally to deal with, because it can be very difficult the first time that happens to you. But the third, fourth, fifth time, it's like, all right, whatever. How do I make it back? And you get right to it.
Absolutely. I mean, so on that given Sunday where your friend was backing you, if you wouldn't have been to that day, if you'd have done what I suppose is not an untypical Sunday, and for most people, which is even good players, and the opposite of binking, you just brick everything, what would have happened then?
Well, so I sold him 20% of the action, and then he fronted me the rest. So I would have owed him like 10K or whatever if I just missed the whole Sunday, So it was just sort of like I was only my young 20s. I didn't really have commitments, so it's like if you run up a little bit of a debt to a friend in poker, it's not that big of a deal. But it was kind of just like just throw yourself into the fire and see what you can get type of moment. And it was kind of inspiring, because I was back for like 6 months before that. And it's like, okay, now you're on your own. Like whatever you make, you just get. And it's like, oh, okay, like it's sort of energizing. Yeah. But it's also terrifying. The older you get, the more you think about the downside. But back then, it was all just like, how do I get back in action, and what can I make out of this?
Yeah. So let's just talk about Black Friday. And I mean, maybe for people who are, I mean, I'm certainly old enough to remember it. I wasn't a professional then, but I did have funds on Full Tilt at the time, and Ultimate, what was the other one? Ultimate Bet or something?
Ultimate Bet, yes.
Yeah.
Absolute Poker, those two.
Yeah. To maybe share with everybody what Black Friday was about and how it impacted you, because I think it did impact you to a reasonably significant extent, especially as by that time you were a pro, right?
Yeah, it was huge for me, because the first 4 months of 2011, I was still living in California. I had finally made it. I was in the top 10 on Pocket Fives. I was crushing. I was just making like an obscene amount of money that year at poker. Everything was going great. And then, suddenly in mid-April, they just announced that Stars and Full Tilt are under investigation by the DOJ, blah, blah, blah. Stars paid out immediately, but most of my money was on Full Tilt, unfortunately. So my plan was like, I took the Stars money and I was like, all right, I'll go play the World Series of Poker. And then after the World Series, I'll relocate and I'll get my Full Tilt money, because Full Tilt was still paying people who lived abroad at that time. So I did that, but then halfway through the World Series, Full Tilt just completely shut down. They stopped dealing games at all. And so at that point, it's like, but until then, I had sort of deluded myself into thinking that it would all work out. I could just go somewhere else and, move to Canada, and now I'm Canadian and Full Tilt will give me my money. But once they stopped dealing games at all, it was like, it was a very serious moment for me. It's like, this money might actually just be gone. I remember hearing the news, and I was on the phone with my friend, the same friend who backed me in the other situation I was talking about. And I was just like, I could barely form a sentence. I was just devastated emotionally. It was very difficult because I had just made it and then had it all taken away from me again. So that after that World Series, I didn't do particularly well because I was very distracted, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
I'd kind of run up a little backing operation before Black Friday, and I kind of tried to keep it going. And obviously, when you don't have the same income flow, it's very difficult to run such a thing. So yeah, the summer kind of ended in disaster. By the end of it, my Full Tilt money was probably gone. It seemed like I'd blown through most of my stars money. I could no longer play poker from where I lived. It was a real low moment for me. So I relocated to Canada for a little bit just to get my stuff back up and running. But it's hard to stay there permanently as an American. They can get in there for 6 months at a time, but it's surprisingly difficult to do anymore. So, after 2012, 2013, I kind of got things back on track a little bit. And then we came here to Europe with the intention of playing the EPT and getting my online accounts back. And we've been here ever since, 10 years now.
Yeah, great. And you're currently in Holland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And let's just from there just talk a little bit about, because I know you now have a family, and I always thought, because I played MTTs for most of my professional career, it was a hard format to balance with a family life.
Yes.
And particularly as the peak time in Europe is sort of the evenings. I know there's guys in other parts of the world who are able to play during the day. How have you managed to hit that balance? Because I know family is important to you, and I know you give a lot of time to that. How have you managed to balance that with all the demands? And we'll talk about some of the other demands you've got on your time now with streaming and Natural 8, being an ambassador. But yeah, how have you managed to do all of that?
So I work at night mostly, and I just kind of am nocturnal. I work from maybe 7 p.m. to 1 or 2 a.m. depending on how it goes, and then I'll sleep in the mornings. And my wife, I had to take the kids to school in the morning for a while when the baby was first born, but now she's back to doing it again, so that's kind of nice for that. But then the other good thing about this is I get to spend most of the time with the kids when they're actually home. The time I miss is mostly time that they're at school anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is difficult to juggle everything else though, with streaming and YouTube channel, and I often find myself lapsing on things for an extended period of time just because there's so many balls in the air. But the one thing that I am pretty consistent about is playing. I still enjoy the game quite a bit, and I still play a lot. And just kind of having it all be at night. I start my tournaments when the kids go to bed, so I don't really have the distraction. And so the way I pay for it is just by sleeping in the mornings, and I'll miss some morning time on weekends. But for the most part, I get to spend the vast majority of the time that my kids are home with them, which is quite nice.
That's great. And let's just talk a little bit generally about, what have you found to be the biggest mental game challenges in your entire time in poker? I mean, you've already been through the fire. You've described a couple of pretty difficult situations, way beyond what people talk about when they think about variance in poker. I mean,
right.
The whole Black Friday thing was an absolute meteor strike, way beyond a bad run of cards. But tell us what have been the biggest challenges you've had and how you've overcome them.
So the hardest challenge for me is just kind of making sure I'm always engaged with the game and not kind of autopiloting, because it's such an in-depth strategic game that if you find yourself autopiloting or shortcutting too much, you'll just make bad decisions. And it's very difficult. Because like I said, I like playing a lot. I try to play almost every day. And first there will be stretches I'll go through where I'm not thinking things through clearly enough, and I'm not really engaged in the game as much as I need to be. So it's a constant battle for me to always make sure I'm studying enough, make sure I'm truly engaging with the game, or force myself to take time off when I'm not, feeling fully mentally engaged with the game. That's the biggest issue I've had over the years. I've definitely had stretches where I've fallen way behind on studying, and I've been behind the curve, and I've been the losing player for stretches. It's very important to balance all that. And there's this temptation when you're a pro to think I play X amount of hours and I get Y amount of money. And it's yeah, ideally that's how it works, but like the quality of play really matters quite a bit, and making sure that you're on top of things. And, it's very easy to actually slip into like a negative expectation if you're not staying on top of things and studying and game selecting well and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, on the question of being really engaged and avoiding all autopiloting, I mean, of course, you're now got a very popular Twitch stream. How have you found streaming? Some people say it can actually help their focus. How have you found streaming?
It depends. Like if it helps my focus if I'm really feeling like I want to do it that day. But like the more kids I've had, the less I've wanted to be on stream all the time. It's kind of like when it's at nighttime and everyone's like quiet, I kind of want to just sit and click my buttons,
Yeah.
So in recent years, I haven't been streaming as much, but I have found that like I've had a few big scores on stream, and I do think that the talking things through in real time can help with your thought process, because you feel compelled to explain it to the microphone. And then, if you were going to do something stupid, maybe you'll stop yourself, or if you're going to shortcut something like, oh, like I'm supposed to like technically flat here, but it's like almost a shove, and shoving's a lot easier. I'll just shove. It's like, no, I mean, do the thing that's actually correct. Like even if it's like a very slight EV difference, those things add up dramatically. So I think Twitch can also be distracting, especially if you're paying too much attention to chat, or if chat's like trolling you or something. But I'm pretty good at tuning that out when I need to. I've found it mostly to be a boon to my play when I'm like deep in tournaments. But when I'm earlier in tournaments and I'm playing a whole bunch of tables, it does get a little bit distracting. So it's hard to find the right balance, because you want to stream the most interesting things. So like ideally you just get deep runs and then stream those. But then sometimes you don't get the max number of viewers that way, because you want to have your stream on for a long time to accumulate viewers. So it's constant balancing act between, like raw amount of time and like high quality time that you want to spend on Twitch. But yeah, I found it mostly to be helpful for focusing deep in tournaments.
Yeah. Let's just talk as well about that's part of your public profile. Another part of your public profile is your role as an ambassador for Natural 8. Just share a little bit about this. I mean, I think for a lot of professional poker players, it's a dream to be a sponsored pro. But I know from some of my own clients, it carries certain responsibilities, and sometimes there's a little bit of negotiating, talking that needs to be done between the player and the sponsor to make sure that everything works for them. Tell me a little bit about that and how it benefits you, but beyond the obvious of the financial benefits, but also talk about its responsibilities, and how you've managed to deal with that.
Yeah, so Natural 8's been really a great company to partner with. Like I got in with them in 2017, which was when the GG network was still very small. Yeah. At first, they were basically trying to get prop players to run their tournaments, because they'd have to like get 20 people to start their $30 bounty builder, and now it gets thousands every day. It's really been an amazing journey working with them, and they've actually been very, very good about it. Like when I take breaks for getting burned out on streaming or whatever, they're really good about letting me take some downtime or whatever when I need to. I've found it to be good for my my profile, and it's nice because most of my action I play on Natural 8/GG anyway, so it's nice to have the pro avatar and stuff, and it probably gets people to punt to me more. But yeah, personally, I'd say my experience has been very positive with them. It's really been great seeing the company grow from like this tiny little site that I would have to like really try to get the volume on to like somewhere where I just naturally want to play all of my tournaments all the time. One thing I wish there was a little bit more live action, because most of the live stuff they do is over in Asia, so I haven't really had a chance to visit that yet. But I would love to make it over there someday if I can get to Taiwan in time. Well, there's a big tournament in Taipei coming up this month, but I'm going to Monaco instead. It's a little closer to home. Yeah.
No, I mean, the growth of the GG network's been incredible. And I have to say, it's a great place to play. So, I can definitely share your feelings about that. Let's just talk a little bit about where you go from here. Just talk a little bit about, you've kept going. You clearly still love poker. What is your long-term vision? What are your goals for the future?
I would like to, I've been expanding a little bit into trading, like crypto trading. I was like really big into that for the last couple of years during the boom. And then last year I was trying to do some shorting on the way down as well. It's very similar to poker in a lot of ways, but it's also, a lot of pitfalls. It's a very difficult thing to get involved with, but that's something that I have a lot of passion for. And I'd like to continue learning and exploring that. I'll keep playing poker for as long as it's good, though. We have the AI singularity sort of barreling down on us, so we'll have to see if that hits poker first or if it hits other things first. It's going to disrupt everything, so I can't be overly worried about it hitting poker first. But it's nice to have a few different things that, planted everywhere. Like we've made a couple of courses. We have the fundamentals course that just came out, and we have the mid-stakes mastery course. So my friend and I have been working on making coaching material. I have the social media avenues as well. I've done some announcing. So, it's good to just develop a lot of little skills, and that way you can kind of be flexible for the future when it comes. But I do intend on staying in poker for as long as it's worth doing so. And for the time being, it still seems like it's quite good. And I do still enjoy it. So I hope I can keep playing for a while yet.
Yeah, and we'll put the links for everybody watching and listening in the show notes for the courses that Bryan's referred to there. And I can definitely recommend Bryan as somebody who can give great advice, not just because of his record, but of course, you and I back in the day were in the same stable, and you were good enough to share some of your thoughts with me when I was a definite newbie to the world of MTTs.
And you were very willing to learn. It was quite rewarding to work with you, actually. So
because I think I think it's Mike Wasserman you're doing the course with.
Yes, Mike. That's right.
Yeah, who also I think is very good at explaining his thought processes. So I really enjoy it. I think it's going to be great for anybody who's wanting to get some really great fundamentals in place. I think those courses are going to be good. So let's just talk about now, are there any key habits and processes that you've really developed over all of these years, things that are the real backbone of what keeps you, on the track that you've been able to sustain a high-level professional career? If you could isolate 2-3 things, what are they that you keep doing and you would really not want to lose from your practice?
I mean, this is a more recent development, but just studying like obsessively. Every time I play, I screenshot, 20, 30 hands, and I'll check all of them the next morning or after the session. And I think getting in the habit of doing that has been really good for me, trying to keep up with the theory, because it just it advances so quickly, and things that you thought were correct 5 years ago might have been completely wrong. And I think being very on top of that, making sure every single day you're looking at solutions and you're looking at hands and spots and everything, I think it's interesting, because when I first started, we didn't have any of that stuff. So we were just all, messing around and just playing poker, and it was great. It was easy. But nowadays you really have to treat it much more professionally. I guess the other thing is just consistency through all the ups and downs, through all the different types of games we've seen and coming and going and stuff. I've just been very consistent about playing and, maintaining my schedule and just maintaining my ability to keep functioning in the MTT world. So I guess it's a combination of like studying and consistency are the two things right now that I think are keeping me relevant for the time being.
Yeah, that's great. Well, in achieving that consistency, just tell me, do you have particular habits around your health to make sure you maybe are able to just keep physically reproducing the effort levels and the energy levels? Because that's one of the remarkable things, about your career. It's, you play huge volume, and you have done so for such a long time, and you seem to have that motivation, that energy to keep going. And that's not easily done. Are the things you do around your health, and maybe exercise, nutrition, is there anything that you do to really make sure that you're in good shape mentally and physically?
Nothing too fancy. I do try to exercise a lot. Like I try to go for at least like an hour walk daily if possible. And then I'll go to the gym like twice a week, although with the kids it's harder to keep that up. But so nothing too fancy with that. I drink a lot of coffee when I first start playing. So like I have kind of a weird caffeine consumption where I don't start drinking coffee until like 6 in the evening. And then when I first start playing, I'll have like a pretty good amount. One of the challenges of MTTs, I think in particular, is like managing your mental strength, because you need the most mental clarity, like the deepest into your session. So it can kind of be a weird, so it's important to have a sort of like running where you need to like maintain your like second gear until you really need it. And you have to be able to like click into that even though you're already tired from doing other things. So that's been difficult. And that's one of the hardest things to stay consistent about. But I don't think I have anything too special. Like I just have like kind of generally good habits other than my sleep schedule, which is probably not ideal. But I do get a lot of sleep. I just get it at weird times.
Yeah, a couple of things there. One thing I'd highlight to everybody is walking is great. Walking is massively underrated as a means of keeping fit, and it's great for your mental state. If you get outside, you get some natural daylight, that's huge. And this is the thing, in a sense, it doesn't have to be a fancy program, does it? It's something as simple as going for a walk.
Very basic.
And doing it consistently is huge. And yeah, I mean, look, that's one of the challenges of MTTs. I mean, I eventually switched to a daytime schedule just because I found the evening schedule so hard, because my chronotype is just not suited to that. But if you can't, if you're going to play evenings, then just get a lot of sleep. Just go for it and make that a big priority. And that is going to replenish those neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, which are going to keep you motivated, keep you focused. And yeah, sleeping and walking, with a bit of coffee thrown in there is going to be a pretty good recipe. And yeah, you can then add in a couple of workouts, great, but you're almost into bonus territory then. That's great. Okay, well, I just want you to now just reflect back, and if this is the great thing about a career of your longevity and success. I think hopefully you can really share something for everybody over and above what you've already given us. But if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self embarking on your career as a professional, something you wish you'd known and wish you'd been able to say to yourself and listened at an early stage in your career, what would it be?
Well, the troll answer is just buy Bitcoin and avoid having to play poker at all. But the real answer, I guess, would be network and make sure that you're learning from people who are performing at the highest level at any given time. And I think that I've spent too long stretches of my career kind of like laboring by myself in the darkness when I could have just reached out to some other pros, learned things, and gotten there a lot faster. So I think that that is probably the biggest one is just networking and just knowing when you need to get additional assistance or coaching to kind of like catch up again and making sure that you're very on top of that. Because I wasted a lot of years playing at a subpar level because I just didn't brush up on the theory fast enough, or I didn't have the right connections to tell me what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, I can definitely second that. And this comes up time and again when I ask people this or a similar question. And definitely for sure, I found that my own career, really leapt forward when I sort of engage with guys like yourself. And yeah, it's funny, you can be a lone wolf, but it just is very hard to make it work. So that's a great piece of advice for everybody. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you giving this time because I know you're a busy man. I know you put in huge volume. I know you do a lot of work on streaming and for Natural 8. So I really appreciate it. And as I say, it's great to see you again. And thanks for sharing your time and thoughts with us, Bryan.
Yeah, nice to reconnect after all these years, and happy to come on anytime you want some content. Thanks for having me.
Okay, then. That's great. Thanks, Bryan. So thanks to Bryan for sharing his thoughts and time. I think there's so much to learn from players who've been at the top level for so long because they must have established good patterns, good ways of dealing with the inevitable challenges that professional poker shows at you. And thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you for the next episode of the Mindset Advantage podcast. Thanks and goodbye.
Now, if you're looking for the simplest way to take your mental game to the next level, then head on over to pokermindcoach.com/primed to try my mindset coaching app, Prime Mind, free for 7 days. That's pokermindcoach.com/primed. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast. To get future episodes delivered to you automatically, make sure to subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting service. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.